It's a new year and a new chance for you to make a fresh start with your compliance. For the next 31 days on the FCPA Compliance Report, we're going to be bringing you a daily tip, strategy, or idea that you can use to improve your program. Here's your host, Tom Fox, the Compliance Evangelist.
The witness interview. What are the characteristics of a good interview in the context of an internal investigation? Is there one technique which you can use which will provide the results you want to achieve? How should you think through your questions and your documentation prior to the investigation? Now, how do such issues come into play in the time of coronavirus? There is no one right way to prepare for and conduct an interview. What is important is that you have a plan and execute on that plan. This begins with obtaining an understanding of what the various stakeholders want going forward. Your stakeholders could include the board of directors, C-suite executives, the general counsel and the legal department, the chief compliance officer and the compliance function, or up to government regulators such as the Department of Justice or the Securities and Exchange Commission. It's important to interview witnesses as soon as you can reasonably do so to prevent multiple witnesses from getting together and coordinating their story. You should recognize you are never going to have perfect information, so you should try and tie down the story. If the witness is not an English speaker, you should have a translator present. You should also have a second person with you to take notes so you can watch a witness's facial expressions, and if you can do the interview live and in person, their body language. Listening to what an interviewee says and how they're saying it can give you as much information as anything else. You should also have a note taker who should be free from bias and subjectivity, simply taking down a detailed recitation of the witness statements. Your interview should not be putting the witness in the box. You should attempt to establish a rapport with witnesses so they will be more forthcoming in their responses. I don't view this as a contentious exercise, and it's really about building rapport. If somebody feels like you're cross-examining them or it's very structured, not free-flowing, allowing them to answer the questions in a secure and comfortable environment, you will not get your best information. It is an all-out effort to garner an understanding of what facts the witness has had, what the witness may or may not be aware of in determining others who might be potentially involved. An investigation should not be viewed as an interrogation either. You should avoid loaded questions such as, where did you bribe the inspector? Instead, design your questions to circle around such a point. Also, the age-old maxim to avoid compound questions, one question at a time. You should also try and develop facts during the interview to get exactly what occurred, when it happened, where it happened, who it happened with, if anyone else was present, and who was present at the incident in question. You can also add such lines of inquiries as who else may be aware of the information. How did it happen? Do you know how it happened? Etc. Are there notes, documents, phone messages, or emails? Are there other information that needs to be reviewed? A lot of times in the interview, if somebody is willing to talk, they usually have something they can provide. A lot of times, if you don't ask, you don't get the info. It's best practice to document the information immediately as soon as the interview is over. You should spend time with the note taker and go over both sets of notes if taken, making sure you understand exactly what was said and how it was said. If there are any observations to make during a question that may have not been a part of the write-up, you should add those things. It is important because the longer you wait, the more inaccurate your account of what happened becomes. You should make it a practice after the interview to write up your notes or at least dictate a summary. You should also consider internal investigations as a chess match. In an interview, a chess match is when you're playing chess and you have to think several moves ahead, if not 3, 4, or 5. Can you do so? What about some of the strategies around the interview process? One can be an inside-out strategy, which if the allegations extend beyond the enterprise. In this technique, you can interview people inside the organization first, then maybe go outside to third parties. Conversely, as the outside-in strategy, or where you start with the third parties and work your way inside to your corporation, or a combination of both. If you use both strategies, remember there's always the potential for collusion, as people will always talk. Conducting simultaneous interviews sometimes can prevent those individuals from coordinating and collaborating on their story that's going to tell you. If you start getting multiple stories where all of the details line up exactly, that means you've got a problem. So what are today's 3 key takeaways? Well, the first one, and the one I would really like you to take away from, is there's no one right way to do an interview. In large part, an interview is your strategy, your tactics wrapped around your personality. I hope you can be engaging and work to create, if not a relationship with the interviewee, but also a safe place for them to talk to you, because that's going to be important for getting good, solid information from them. That really leads to point number 2, which is the interview should be not confrontational. This is not a gotcha. This is not they're in the box. You're not springing documents on them. You're circling around, nibbling away at little bits so that you can get a much bigger picture. You will probably get a much more fuller picture if you do this, but you'll certainly not garner the witnesses' respect and put their guard up if you make the interview confrontational. Also, giving the witness respect, it can be hugely important in garnering more cooperation and indeed more information out of them. And then finally, always remember that the interview, like the entire investigation process itself, it's much like a chess game. You should have a plan. You should be thinking out 3 to 5 moves ahead, but don't forget that your plan has to be adaptable. Adaptability is a key element of executing on a plan. And so having a plan, but also changing that plan as necessary. If you get more information, if you get additional information, if your information takes you in a different direction, you need to be ready to respond to that going forward. So these are the 3 key takeaways, and I know that they will help you going forward. This is Tom Fox. I hope you will enjoy this month's offering on hotlines and investigations. A 31 days to a more effective compliance program. If I could ask you to do so, would you pass on to at least one person this podcast series on the nuts and bolts of compliance, as I'm trying to expand my audience base for 31 days to a more effective compliance program. I hope you'll join me again tomorrow, where I take up another topic in innovation in compliance. Thanks again for listening. 31 Days to a More Effective Compliance Program is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network.